Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth Voyage Efficiency for CII compliance event by BS Group, sponsored by ABS Wavesight. My name is Risto-Kariranta and I'm moderating this panel, and a little bit about myself. I'm CEO of Ahti Climate Gold company, concentrating on emission cost compliance or emission compliance cost optimization, and I'm sitting here in Helsinki, Finland at the moment. My background is from shipping, long history in there, first sailing by myself, then working for maritime software companies, and my last employer before the current position was at Neste, which is a Finnish energy company producing renewable energy. And the program today, we have 5 speakers, including myself, and how we will run this is we will have first short presentations by everybody, and after each presentation we have very short couple minutes Q&A, and after everybody have presented, then we have a longer joint Q&A for joint discussion. And good, I will start with my own presentation, and let's go through that one and then move to the others. Just a second, I'll put my screen sharing on. Just a second, let's open, and here we go. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is alternative fuels and how these are treated in the different emission regulations, including CII, but also the European regulation, EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime, that are soon to be started here for those who have vessels calling European ports. So what are these alternative fuels? What is the definition I'm using here? When I'm talking about alternative fuels, I refer to the fuels that are not the traditional fossil fuels, and typically aiming for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and in some cases other harmful externalities from the exhaust fumes. And what do we have today in this field? We have LNG available. I think we have in total something like 900 vessels in the world that are able to consume LNG as a fuel, starting from LNG carriers that quite often can consume the boiler from the cargo as a fuel. The second one I have listed here is LPG, so liquefied gases other than LNG, and this is typical solution for LPG carriers. The third option, alternative that we have today available already, are liquid biofuels, and this part here is increasing quite quickly now. There seems to be more and more demand also in shipping for the biofuels. And for the biofuels, the kind of easiness is that this does not require typically any technological changes for the vessels, but we can call those like drop-in solutions, meaning that you can put those in the tank and start to consume. But I think many of us have read quite a lot of news about the future alternative fuels, and here we have typically fuels like ammonia-based solution, methanol-based solution, and methane, kind of a methane pathway. And in regards to the GHG emission reductions, all of these fuels should be produced somehow other than consuming fossil fuels in order to in total reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Ammonia is something that seems to be quite popular option, even though there are no ammonia engines yet available. But to my understanding, quite soon we will have also this option on the table that the engine producers will have the ammonia engine there in place. So there are quite many ships ordered with the ammonia readiness, which then means sometimes different things, but mainly having the tank system ready for the ammonia, the piping and so forth, and then basically expecting some minor modifications for the engine when the ammonia use should be starting. Methanol is as a green or e-methanol, it's slightly more expensive to produce compared to ammonia, but it's perhaps a little bit easier fuel than ammonia because it's a liquid fuel, so it doesn't require that extensive modification for the normal ship designs. And then we have a methane path that could include, for example, bio LNG, e-LNG or e-methane, if you want to call it like that. And there you would need to kind of start from an LNG vessel, and then you can start to also consume these lower greenhouse gas intensive fuels. These, I think, are the most considered options at the moment. There are also some others like pure hydrogen, electricity, which have perhaps for ocean-going vessels still too low range to be considered, but perhaps for the coastal traffic those could also be a considerable option. And why should we care about these alternative fuels? These are, for sure, these will be really expensive, but the reasoning is that we have regulations coming up that will force shipping to start to use these. We have FuelEU Maritime starting 2025 that will mandate vessels to start gradually using more and more low carbon fuels. And it's not possible to reach all the targets of FuelEU Maritime that are ranging until 2050 without dramatically changing the fuels that are being used. So 2050, the requirement from FuelEU Maritime is 80% reduction in carbon intensity, and you pretty much can't reach that without changing to these so-called e-fuels or RFNBO fuels, like in some regulatory text, those are referred. Also, we have a so-called voluntary market, meaning that some customers of the shipping companies are starting to request low carbon marine transportation. Some of us saw in the news that IKEA and some other companies were starting a tender for zero carbon transportation, and we expect that this is slightly increasing this kind of voluntary demand also for low carbon marine transportation. And then third, perhaps most difficult to predict the demand driver are the Scope 3 emissions. So for big corporates that require marine transportation, the emissions from that are calculated to their Scope 3 emissions, and that has become a headache for some bigger public companies. And there are also other emissions that are calculated to this Scope 3, but typically shipping is quite big chunk of that Scope 3 and quite big units. So if there is a need to reduce that, for example, for ESG reporting purposes and getting better financial terms from the investors, then shipping is a lucrative target for reducing these big units, and then basically doing some moves there is a relatively impactful move to impact these Scope 3 emissions. Okay, regulatory landscape, we all know about CII here, so I don't need to go through that very much, but I'm concentrating here on how alternative fuels are here considered in CII. So basic concept is to calculate the total emissions over the year and divide that by deadweight ton miles. And when we are calculating these emissions, we are using the fuel consumption as a basis. And traditionally, we have had this list of emission conversion factors, but this list has been quite limited. We have only like very traditional fossil solutions here. And earlier, the approach was that if you didn't have your fuel here in the list, then you had to choose what is closest to what you are using. So it was really, really difficult to get any benefit from using these alternative fuels. But now there is a change. Okay, this is a bit text-heavy slide, but nevertheless, there is now, after MEPC 80 by IMO last summer, they were able to make a kind of a term sheet on what conditions you can get reductions for your emissions in CII using biofuels. And the basic criteria is that well-to-wake, so including the production emissions, transportation emissions, and the chimney emissions on board, the GHG emission reduction should be at least 65% in order to get this reduction. And this 65% compared to MGO level that has considered to be here 94 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions per megajoule. So the limit is somewhere around 33 grams. And based on that and energy content, you can calculate the emission factor that you can use in your IMO DCS calculations then for getting this reduced number. And if you use blends, then you can kind of mass balance that how much you use this lower factor fuel and lower carbon fuel and how much traditional, and calculate out the kind of a mass balanced carbon conversion factor. And what is required this to be accepted, you need a so-called proof of sustainability for the fuel that you're going to consume, which should be delivered to you among the bunker delivery note. And this proof of sustainability, this should include this well-to-wake emission factor so that you can do your calculations based on that. And roughly how much this has impact, I have one sample voyage here. So voyage, Aframax voyage from Rotterdam to Trieste, 3,136 nautical miles with 12 knots. Total consumption estimated with traditional fuels, 388 tons. And CII with traditional fuels would be 3.3, LNG 2.4, LPG 2.7, methanol 3.0. But then with the biofuels, now you would need to calculate based on this calculation formula that was presented in the last slide, and you could, with the pure biofuel having good feedstock, you could reach perhaps something like 20%, even 20% of the fossil fuel part. So meaning this could be close to 0.7 or something like that. What about EU ETS? Okay, there we have we use traditionally in EU ETS we use the so-called tank to wake emissions. So only the emissions that are produced on board the vessels burning the fuel, and we had there pretty much the same problem that we had with CII that there was a very limited list of fuel that had some special emission factors. But here, this issue has been solved so that if the fuel that you're consuming, alternative fuel you're consuming, is categorized as a sustainable fuel according to Renewable Energy Directive, then you get the zero emission factor for carbon dioxide in emission trading system. And this requirement is 70% reduction compared to the fossil solution. So it's quite tight, but I think even with the best biofuels, you're able to reach that, and not to mention these e-fuels. So then you don't need to basically buy the emission allowances in EU ETS with those solutions. Then Fuel EU Maritime. There we have the carbon intensity requirement. So basically we need to start to consume these low carbon fuels in the future, and this whole regulation is about these well-to-wake emission factors. So this means that you need to, at the first phase, 2025, reduce the total carbon intensity by 2%, and each and every fuel will have their own separate carbon intensity, and you need to start to consider which fuels to use in order to reach this. So if you look at this picture 2 here, we have the fossil fuels that are above or close to 92 grams, and then LNG slightly less, and then biofuels here in this group, and finally the e-fuels that have typically can reach the level of like 5 grams. And you need to then calculate out that how much which fuel you can use. Fuel EU Maritime, we have also the other tools like pooling that can be used for making it so that you use alternative fuels on board couple vessels, and then try to get the other vessels balanced out from these good vessels, so kind of transferring over compliance from good vessels to bad vessels. And just to give you a rough idea, one vessel consuming e-methanol could basically 2025 with this pooling keep 65 or even 70 HFO driven vessels compliant, and with LNG the ratio is like 1:5. Okay, we have gone through my slides. I need to jump back to here and stop just a second. Okay, we have time for one question here before we go to the next one. Okay, there is no questions at the moment. Okay, we will take those then at the end of the event if you come up with some questions. And in this application that is used for the webinar, this is this button Q&A. Okay, for some reason I'm not seeing the questions. Okay, now I found. Okay, good. Okay, I'll take one here. Availability of the. Okay, I'll take these at the end of the event. It's perhaps now good that we move on, and I'll think about the answers for these questions meanwhile. But yeah, so next presenter is Gurinder Singh from ABS Wavesight. And well, first of all, Gurinder, welcome to this event. Would you like to first tell a little bit about yourself and then start your presentation? Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Risto. My name is Gurinder Singh. I'm the head of solution engineering with ABS Wavesight. Just pleasure to be here with this group and to talk about a very pertinent and, of course, top of our mind topic. I've been with ABS since 2011. Prior to that, I was in the shipbuilding industry, and I've been very much focused on within ABS, focused on LNG and sustainability, and then leading to digital tools that would forward the mission, which is the larger ABS mission that involves the safety and security of life assets and environment as well. So pleasure to join you all, and I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, I think that's coming through. Oh, sorry. There we go. So again, welcome to all. I just have a few slides today. Wanted to share sort of some of the thoughts we have within ABS Wavesight, around CII and other regulations that are coming up. Not necessarily deep dive into those, but what's our thoughts and how we're thinking this is shaping day-to-day decision making within an owner and operator. So give a little bit about who we are. Of course, ABS is quite well known, been around since 1862. However, ABS Wavesight was formed just last year as a subsidiary, a wholly owned subsidiary of ABS. We're an affiliated company, and we're portfolio. We have a portfolio of products that's spanning, optimizing fleet performance to ship operations to increasing commercial profitability. To date, we have a little over 5,000 vessels that are, consider our install base for the three products that we have. Those three products being nautical systems, which is a fleet management system, My Digital Fleet, which is most relevant for today's discussion, and then electronic logsbook product as well, called eLogs. The focus for us really in this in the space is to be able to make sure that their decisions and uses that are being catered to all the way from the crew to the C-suite, and configure as appropriate for the ship-to-shore communications as well. Last thing here to tell about it is it's been quite a journey to get this, so I put that in here. We have earlier this year also received our cybersecurity certifications for SOC 2, Type 1, Type 2, and ISO certification as well. All right. That was just a little bit about us. We have within ABS as a large organization, and then ABS Wavesight, we've been very much focused on understanding first what is sort of driving a lot of the software innovation, and of course building that within what we're doing as well. But I don't think this is a surprise to anybody who's familiar and been following some of the trends related to software products within the maritime industry. We see them as four major trends: sustainability and compliance, which is of course very much focused on the discussion today around decarbonization and regulatory pressures that are mounting, as well as other external stakeholders. Product adoption and usability, we're starting to see the user experience and interfaces of these software products get much better, which allow that sort of onboarding and the ease of use, which allows a greater amount of adoption. Connectivity is of course a big item over the last couple of years, and continuing to improve. We've actually recently had a couple of customers move on to Starlink and had good success, and that allows us to do many different things that we weren't able to do before. And of course, last but definitely not least is the disparate data sources that the industry and each organization is having to deal with. And that push toward standardization is really creating a need for tools that will allow to do that. We have, with all of that in mind, of course, as I mentioned, that first bucket is where our focus is today. And so going a little bit deeper on those, those pressure side we were talking about. With a number of stakeholders out there, right, the expectations are seemingly simple, right? Decarbonization is a significant decision factor for all the industry stakeholders today. The units of measurement, however, for these same stakeholders, very many of them, right? So just trying to illustrate here that, everybody has their own sort of coin, if you will. The regulator's single unit might look like a square. The charters looks like a circle. The financiers looks like a triangle, right? But the point being that these different ways of measuring what we all look for, decarbonization or reducing of our emissions footprint or carbon footprint, is really an area where, if sub-optimized, can actually cause an issue with one of those stakeholders or the other. And what's even more important here, right, is that these different unit of measures then have to come down to an owner-operator who has to, within their commercial operation and technical teams, have to make decisions that ideally are optimal for all of these stakeholders. And as we know, that's easier said than done, right? Why is there that complexity? I think it is well known, but I want to just share how, just some examples here of, the functional teams within an organization. And of course, commercial teams having their sort of metrics and KPIs, the operations team, the technical team, right? And while each one is related, of course, in some manner, but I think we all know when it comes to decision making within that functional team, they're focused on their metrics, and that's how they've been moving so far. The adder, and if you will, the wild card that has come in, are the decarbonization metrics, which necessitate the need for the organization to work together across these functional teams to be able to make those optimal decisions. Where this becomes difficult is teams that have been making decisions sort of in their own silos, if you will, and having to work across and be able to affect others' metrics is a significant change. And that change in the industry is as much of a process change and mindset change as it is for bringing in softwares that'll help with promoting that change and allowing transparency, not just across the organization, but the expected transparency with the stakeholders as well. So with that in mind, I just have one quick plug here for our solution that is focused on just this. Our My Digital Fleet platform is focused on bringing all these different stakeholder views, these disparate data sources, and start to deliver insights that allow each of these functional teams to collaborate better, to make decisions collectively, to provide an optimal end result for a voyage, for that vessel, for that year, and so on. The modules we really focus on that allow for improvements from an operational perspective are 5 of them here. My dashboard, which gives of overall fleet-wide operational visibility. Our voyage plan and tracking, of course, doing optimization with, connected with our partners. And then, of course, tracking what those goals have been set for each specific voyage. As I was mentioning about the KPIs earlier, vessel performance, this was mentioned around, maintenance and proactive maintenance, and what we like to call condition-based maintenance is a very big topic as well, which really stems from not just looking at it at a yearly level, but starting to figure out how that impacts at the voyage level as well. Our fuel monitoring on a daily basis and just getting good validated data in to a system to allow you to make good decisions. Very, very, very critical for all of us, as again, with many sources to bring in and consolidate. And then finally, environmental monitoring, where we're monitoring trending emissions, simulating voyages looking forward, and really starting to bring these various regulatory needs, i.e. CII, EU ETS, et cetera. And on top of that, charter needs might be sea cargo charter, and my financier needs, insurer needs. So just trying to solve all of that within our environmental monitor module here. But overall, that's what I wanted to share with the audience. And just knowing one critical thing to end this is our goal, of course, as an industry to decarbonize is very much built on, needed to be built on our collaboration together. So we're very, very much open and look for partnerships that allow us collectively to get better in a space where any assistant, any help, any forward-looking, forward-thinking companies and individuals can assist in moving us in the right direction. With that, end my presentation to see if I can get us in time there. Thank you, and handing it back to you, Risto. And if there's any questions, I'll take those as well.
Thank you. We don't yet have specific questions for you. I was thinking by myself. I was thinking about these different measurements and so. Which of the stakeholders you mentioned there you think will be the prime driver from this?
Well, it's a good question, Risto. I mean, at a voyage level, of course, our the prime drivers is always going to be the charter, right? They are the ones day to day who are looking for this sort of improvements. You mentioned Scope 3, very, very pertinent, of course, because that's what the larger charterers, whether they're oil majors or large companies moving grain and coal, etc. So we see them having the largest impact on a day-to-day basis for voyages. What's interesting is when things start to shift and start to get into the financier realm, and such, that can become quite an interesting discussion as well, because that optimizing always for a voyage may or may not be suitable for the overall yearly goal that you want to set for your fleet, for your portfolio that is visible to a financier. So, but yeah, I think the biggest, most relevant on a day-to-day basis is the charter as a stakeholder.
Good. Yeah, I hope we can discuss this more in detail on the later stage. It's really interesting question. But okay, let's move to the next presentation. We have next Mr. Mattia Canevari from Grandi, Navi, Veloci. Would you like to first introduce yourself and then move to the presentation of yours?
Many thanks, Risto. Thanks, BS Group and Mr. Usable for the kind invitation. I'm very pleased to be here and participate. I work for GMV SPA. That's a MSSC company specialized in the industry of ferry cruise. And I work as an energy and environmental manager. So focused on the energy environmental policy compliances and system integration for our whole fleet. So if I can start, I share the presentation. No, this one. Okay. Sorry, from the beginning's better. Okay, and the full screen. Okay, so let's start with the agenda of the presentation. Starts with a short presentation of GMV, then a brief description of the CII decarbonization framework for the ferry cruise, a step further for the challenges and opportunities that the environmental regulation they gave us, and finally the good practices that they adopt in GMV with the objective to optimize our fleet emission. As I told before, we are an SSE group company. We are a company leader in the cruise ferry segment for cargo and passenger transportation, particularly in the Mediterranean Sea area. We have a total of 24 ships connecting 7 different countries and 18 ports through 31 commercial lines. The previous year, we hosted about 2.3 million of passengers and more or less 4 million of linear meters, confirming the leadership in the sea motorways. Our fleet is composed by 21 RoPax ships and 3 RoRo ships, and our fleet is foreseen an increase in the next year. Actually, the order book holds 4 new ships, 2 of which will use LNG as alternative fuel. As you all know, next year, our ships must have on board a statement of compliance by administration or your recognized organization related to carbon energy intensity ratings. A negative rating means elaborating a plan of corrective actions, and they would be directly described in our ship energy efficiency management plan. So the aim is to improve ship efficiency and mostly keeping the compliance of our ships. You know all of this presented in the slide, but in order to make a short summary, the attenuated operational CII is an index that reflects the yearly ship's emission profile. This will be compared with the required one that is increasingly stringent year after year. And for the RoPax ships in particular, gross tonnage is the capacity driver. This could penalize ship performance primarily due to equivalent CO2 emission without nautical miles traveled, then not considering the real cargo embarked. The result could be that the shipping operator could decide to travel more nautical miles, not necessary, but only to improve the index at the expense of a real reduction in total emissions. The reference line of the required annual operational CII was built with the 2019 CII distribution, using verified consumption of the IMO DCS. You see the reduction factor Z, that is this year 5%, and increases each year of 2% until 2026. It will be the 11% before a reviewing. And the CII target represents the middle point determined by the boundaries below on the right, and is equivalent to the required annual operational CII. To assess the contingent situation, our shipowner association, Assarmatori, asked the Italian register for a specific study in relation to our segment. We're talking about 73 ships under Italian flag with a gross tonnage between 5,000 and 25,000 tons that operated commercial lines between, from, or to Italian ports. It was used the TETIS-MRV database version 196 of November 2021 as a good approximation of the IMO DCS. The study pointed out that already in the first year of application, less than the 37% of the whole fleet would respect CII requirements without further corrective measures. RoPax segment is historically characterized by different types of ships and operative profiles also. In particular, frequent routes with a lot of nautical miles traveled, high speed, an average high speed, long period of port stay. This last factor, port emission, get dramatically worse the situation, considering constraints like seasonality and commercial scheduling with no operative time. So we move to the challenges and opportunities. We see the energy transition like a big wave. We need to prepare for its positive but a very hidden impact on our business, trying to take advantage of the opportunities, but also following the way of the CO2 emission reduction. So it won't be easy. It will require a great effort, and so let's see something more in the following slides. The energy transition path could be separated in three phases: short term, mid term, long term. The first one is the low carbon fuels and technology able to reduce the demand today. And in this context, it's very important the ICT factor that could be considered an enabler for the carbon reduction, not only for technical measure, but also with operational measure like route optimization, just-in-time arrival at port, energy performance assessment, and real-time monitoring of our ships. Moving ahead, we can see the recombination of CO2 with hydrogen to reach carbon neutrality, for example, through the synthetic fuels. And finally, to pursue the zero carbon stage, fuel and technologies based on renewable sources. In this slide, you can see a recap of alternative fuels in the timeline framework. Alternative fuel, as you all know, have a common problem, the energy density. So we need more spaces to have energy enough for our needs. For this reason, a reflection is that it's not so far envisioning a future where local traffic is managed by a full electric or hybrid vessel, like for urban transportation. For this vessel, the problems related to the ship dimension could be balanced with relatively small need of refueling or recharging. There is not a unique solution that fits all. Global fleet is composed by a very wide range of vessels carrying different cargoes, moving passengers with different purposes. So routes, trades, market factors, and technologies applied on board are all variables we have to consider setting the course of the decarbonization of our ships. Another point of attention just mentioned is the regulation framework. So to make some example, in the deep sea transport business particularly, shipowners are very cautious to invest, even though there's a growing number of new buildings. I think that LNG and methanol are an example. And so we are exploring opportunities given by alternative fuels. Cruise industry, another example, was among us hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it has never lost its attention for innovation. And the aspect is confirmed by the LNG new building portfolio of the main actors. And even in this case, dimension make differences. Small ships like, for example, expedition cruise vessel could find an opportunities on batteries or hybrid electric, while large vessel can encounter difficulties due to related spaces needed to store big amounts of green energy. So time is clicking, obviously, what we can do now in this matter. We think that first are implementing reading solution like LNG or or biomethanol, as we told before. And obviously, shipowner must be sure to have a refueling as its fleet's needs in this case. The second case, it's the complementary solution, the adoption of complementary solution. That an example, I put the cold ironing, reducing the carbon footprint of ports. And this is a solution that if electricity is produced by renewable sources, that is a very important aspect, the technology must be encouraged and supported by public institutions. Today, only the 2% of European ports are adapted with this solution. And third, last but not least, the pioneering projects should be supported by government with a clear regulatory framework and the availability to share financial risk that cannot be only a burden for the ship owner. So in this case, speeding up the innovation would be the key succeed challenge of environmental sustainability. And now the good practices that we adopted in GMV. In 2022, we built a maritime support center, a tower control based on 24/7, with the specific objective to having fleet monitoring, incident management, planning and control of operational aspect of both fleet and ports. The MSC officers have deck and engine skills and experience, hardware and software, resources essential for the event management, not only for the safety concern, but also including energy efficiency targets. The entire fleet is monitored and assisted during navigation and alongside ports. All departments are properly involved, in particular the emergency group ashore. Now we see some slides in which I present the hardware and software solution that we use. It's a scalable and module system capable of acquiring data continuously from the ship navigation and the motion systems, or obviously directly from sensor, processing those data, advising us in real time on board and ashore for performance optimization. The system advises how to operate the ship in an optimum way, for example, pointing out the optimum trim from different speed and loading condition. Also, the optimization of the route accounting for weather forecast, allowing us to save fuel of the ship on ship propulsions. The main data are draft displacements and other data are coming from other software or manual entry. Here you can see the advanced analytics module. We can have a propulsion assistance that helps with hydrodynamic performances of the hull and propeller and thermodynamic performance of the main engines. So we have data like speed through water, speed over ground, propulsion power, also presented in this slide by shaft torque meters and RPM, and fuel consumption through flow meters. We have also a trim assistant module that manages information of the trim of the vessel acquired by a high precision inclinometer. When the configuration is far from the optimum trim target, we can intervene immediately from ashore. And here another type of dashboard, a real-time dashboard with speed over ground, speed through water, the alert list that we implement in order to advise our officer on duty, and so on. So I think that when you have deviation from the energy policy, we can solve before losing energy and obviously money. When we finish a mouth, we have an energy monitoring meeting. So it's a monthly review. In this slide, you can see an example of main engine and diesel generator conduction kept in the period. When we have deviation from the energy policy established by the board, on-board engineers and technical superintendents ashore must give an explication of what happened, and this allows us to get improvement in engine conduction and also providing the effectiveness of the procedures. The same we can say for weather forecast and route planning management. Officers on duty receives bulletin with 3 days of anticipation. A detailed view of the map can be studied, resulting in rerouting activities. So this process activates all the departments interested in passenger carrying, updating reservation system, planning new development, obviously, and communicating eventual modification to deck officers. So I finish. I hope I given you some interesting insight, and I thank you for the kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mattia. We had here actually one question related to your presentation about CII. This is about the inclusion of the different vessel types in CII, and here the question is asking that if reefer ships, ice class vessels, heavy lifts are exempted from CII, or do you have some insights about these topics, that which ship types are exempted?
For the reefer?
CII.
Yeah, no, I don't have any data or information regarding this aspect, unfortunately.
Okay, we can then take it later on the Q&A with the others. But you showed us a quite holistic tool for the performance monitoring, and I'm just curious that have you been able to see what kind of results you are gaining with this tool set on the best cases?
More or less, we are monitoring 10 ships, and we want obviously to get more with the entire fleet. But considering specific case, the percentage of saving that you can earn with a very strict control and monitor is between 1% and 2%.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes, very good, because you can obviously matching your needs both in propulsion and in generation. When you are at port, there are some procedures that you have to follow. When you are in navigation, having the officers on duty 24/7, it's very important because they can solve any deviation immediately.
Good. Okay, we will continue with Mattia also in the Q&A session. We will soon publish also a short poll in the chat section, or it will be. Okay, there it is. So we would like to ask from the audience that which aspect of voyage efficiency you consider is most important for the CII compliance. Is it the fuel consumption reduction, meaning energy efficiency, or emission reduction technologies, route optimization, or speed management? So please reply to this poll so that we can get also your views about this topic included into our Q&A session. Thank you. And next, we are moving to Angus Whiston from Deep Sea Technologies, Commercial Director of Deep Sea Technologies. And perhaps Angus, you can first tell a little bit about yourself and then move to your presentation.
Thanks, Risto. Yes, I'm Angus. I'm the Communications Director at Deep Sea. One thing I'm not going to do today is give you a sales pitch about Deep Sea. In fact, I'm not going to mention Deep Sea that much at all, actually. What I am going to do is present a problem that I think it's undeniable the industry has. And I'm going to show how there is only really one approach to properly overcome this solution, this obstacle once and for all. I think in various ways, Gurinder and Mattia and Risto have all so far referenced that there is no one way. There's no silver bullet for solving the efficiency problem on every voyage, because every voyage is different, every ship is different. But there is, at least we believe, one specific approach that does need to be adopted more thoroughly in order to have some quite dramatic results. Now, I don't need to tell anybody, we've all heard it a billion times, exactly what challenges the industry is facing. But one of the things I think is interesting is in April, UMass and Tristram Smith came out with a report which stated that actually over the course of the next decade, the purely improving vessel efficiency could help to meet all of the targets from now until over the next 10 years. So that I think is actually very good news, because a lot of the operational changes that one can make in a shipping company can help to improve that efficiency without having to make very costly retrofits and go into dramatic capex expenditure. Now, the thing is that one of the things I'm very keen to hear from anybody, by the way, as I'm talking, whether some of the things that I say don't don't add up for you. As far as I can see, what I'm going to say here is a very simple narrative, starting with the fact that in order to make marginal improvements, you need to be very accurate in what you're doing. So we're not talking here about making a 30, 40, 50% improvement to vessel efficiency. We all know what just 5% could do in terms of not only hitting incoming regulations, but also in terms of your bottom line fuel bill as a company. Getting everything right means, in terms of voyage optimization, leaving port, making exactly the right route and speed settings, route and speed changes to minimize fuel consumption at that point, and perhaps saving 3% over that period. And then when the conditions change, making the precise tweaks so that you maintain that 3%, increase it to 4, 5, 6, rather than just cancelling out those savings that you might have made. We have to be very, very precise. True optimization is about getting everything right. It's sort of by definition. And yet there is this fundamental problem, which is that we actually don't really know how vessels behave. Now, of course, that's a slightly exaggerated statement. A good model will be able to predict with a fair degree of accuracy. A good captain and good operations team will know very well how each of their vessels performs in different weather conditions. But will they know enough? Can any human know enough to make that 3%, 4%, 5% change every single time correctly, so that you end up making all of the right decisions and all of that good work gets compounded rather than cancelled out? That's the question. That was my instinctive feeling, and I think probably it's all of our instinctive feelings as well. But I actually did a survey at the beginning of the year across a wide range of shipping companies in order to try and ascertain really what we understood accuracy to mean as an industry. So I asked a broad range of shipping companies how well they believe they understand their vessels' behavior in good weather. We had some very well, 41%, but actually 58% of people said quite well. So the thing is, again, in this same story, is quite well enough for genuine optimization? The story, when it goes into bad weather, becomes, as you'd expect, even more opaque. So that very well declined to 8% and quite well moved up to 58%. I didn't. I put in a text field to ask people how to define good and bad weather, but you'd expect the general, so both at 4, this sort of thing. And of course, we all know that this bad weather is a very common occurrence, and on a huge proportion of the voyages which we're sailing. Once again, is this kind of understanding really enough to optimize? And at the core of the problem is, how do we collect all of this information that we know about the behavior of any particular vessel? Well, generally, by and large today, people are doing this, whether it be in-house in a shipping company, whether it be in a weather routing provider, in some form of generic model. Now, for all of you who are in this field, you'll know that generic model is itself a very generic phrase. So this could be anything from a simple fuel table up to something a bit more complicated, maybe taken for a specific class of vessel, maybe based on all sorts of different approaches. But by definition, they are not tailored to the specific vessel, its specific machinery, its specific fouling state, all things that are very important. Once again, if we hypothesize that we could make a 5% improvement to operating efficiency, can we really do it without an incredibly accurate understanding of how that vessel performs? So let's explore a bit more what these generic models actually mean, what impact they actually have. So here, I know it's a bit small, so I hope you can see, but I'll explain, I'll run you through this. This is a very simplified version of an actual voyage. And what we have is, in purple, the speed plan for a particular voyage, generated via a generic model. So this means that the generic model has predicted effectively the fuel consumption of this particular vessel at every point along this route, and it has provided this speed plan. In white, you can see what the optimal plan is. So in period A, you see there is at the top a particularly strong negative current, which means that both the optimal plan and the generic model agree there should be a slowdown. And towards the end in period B, when there is a moderate positive current, both models agree that there should be a speed up. However, what you can see is that relatively subtly, the generic model, because it doesn't absolutely understand how the specific vessel functions in these specific conditions, overcompensates. It knows roughly how to behave, how to respond to these conditions, but not absolutely. And once again, coming back, repeating the same thing, is this good enough to create the kind of optimization that we need in order to make an operational improvement of this sort? If you're working with an ETA, this is your bread and butter. For those of you out there who are working more on a TCE basis, of course, the very important, the foundation of what you need at the end of the day when you're optimizing for TCE is a very accurate understanding of how the duration of the voyage in the weather conditions influences the fuel consumption. Now, I've actually never seen one of these created through a generic model. I'm sure that they do exist. But mostly what you see is something simple like this, right? The question here is, how can you create this curve factoring in the weather? It becomes an incredibly complicated task of simulation. And as soon as you're getting into simulation, you need to have a model. Using a generic model, again, won't cut it, regardless of what your objective is. So this is where we come right back to the very title of this presentation I'm giving, which is about how AI is no longer optional for shipping companies. What does the AI do? So we, as Deep Sea, we're an AI company. We've been developing cutting edge AI in this field since 2017. And whenever we talk to people about the AI, we know that it can be a little bit confusing and a little bit off-putting, trying to understand exactly what this AI does, especially in this age where AI is apparently taking over everything. The fact is that certainly our AI is not going to be taking over your ship, is not going to be becoming sentient and causing World War III. It actually just does one thing. It does this. At any particular point in the ocean, for any particular vessel, given the wind of 13.4 knots and the wind angle of 146 degrees and the current angle and the swell height and the swell period and the wave height and the wave period and the salinity and the fouling state and the speed and the draft and many more things, it will be able to spit out on a very, very granular basis exactly what the fuel consumption will be. Now, this is the understanding that you need when plugged into a simulation to genuinely understand all of the myriad possibilities, all of the myriad different routes and speed combinations that you could possibly take, and then to understand which is exactly the best, which is the genuinely optimal. In other words, getting every single thing right. So you could characterize this. I characterize this personally as shipping going through a transformation, a revolution from standard definition, which is what we're all fundamentally working in, the majority of us. Standard definition as in YouTube 2006, when the vast majority of the global fleet still reports data back in a single email per day. Let's be honest, we're still working in a standard definition world. As we transition further into a high definition understanding of how our vessels behave and how they interact with the conditions that they face, we can build these kind of models that you can see on the screen, very high definition models of specific vessel behavior, and then use those to make data-driven decisions, allowing us to genuinely optimize on very marginal degrees. Coming back to this graph that I showed you, that optimal model, that optimal voyage is generated by one of these custom models. And you can see, once again, it just understands exactly how the vessel behaves. It's not doing anything radical, although occasionally it might. But generally, it's just making exactly the right speed changes or exactly the right route changes to understand holistically how to minimize the fuel consumption or maximize the TCE across any given voyage. If you are optimizing for TCE, it allows you to understand this. It allows you to take that generic curve, which associates the duration of the voyage with the fuel consumption and via the speed, and factor in the weather. So, for example, here, in a very simplified way, there's a storm there, which has changed the way that this curve looks, and will therefore dramatically impact how you behave when you're trying to optimize for TCE. We did relatively recently, which I'm about to publish in a white paper, a full set of experiments to try and understand through a large number of simulations what the actual improvement could be from getting everything right. And we used as our baseline a generic model. So we took a whole series of voyages from a whole series of vessels, and we optimized them using the same algorithms. For those of you who are interested in that side of things, using exactly the same algorithms, we optimized a series of historic voyages, a generic model, and then using a custom model. And at the end of the day, we were trying to find a single number. Now, all of you, including myself, should rightfully be skeptical of single numbers. Of course, this is a whole series of numbers that have been aggregated into one. But the big headline number that we came out with was there was a 6% improvement from changing to a custom model and using that to optimize your voyages, your voyage decisions. Of course, it's very variable, as with everything. Depends on the voyage, depends on the vessel, depends on the speed, all sorts of things. But basically, the way this saving comes from is just three things. Firstly, tailoring voyages to the actual weather impact on a vessel-by-vessel basis. Using this sort of technology to avoid the common phenomenon of adding weather buffers, which is a common thing that we all know and is extremely sensible. If you don't have a granular understanding of how your vessel is going to behave in the weather, including re-optimizing for the weather forecasts as they change, then of course you will want to add in a buffer so that you reach your laycan on time. If we can get rid of that through advanced understanding of actually what's going to happen, then we can really tighten things up. And finally, just as one final point, often in my discussions with people, I find that it's often set up a sort of competition between this sort of dynamic speed approach and a constant power approach. But the fact is that if you are using a model of this sort, then it will find a constant power approach if that is optimal in the scenario. So they're not contrary approaches. This approach absorbs the previous one. And at the end of the day, just to give a little bit of social proof, in case you think I'm just bullshitting throughout all of this, taking this approach with Wallenius Wilhelmsen, exactly this approach through a speed planning tool, there was a validated 7% efficiency improvement, which they have gone on record and stated, which equated per vessel to $2,000 per day for them. Now, of course, final thing I'm going to say, and then I'll shut up. There is a whole separate, very important discussion to be had on how you measure this. I'd be very happy to talk to anyone about the very lengthy, but ultimately very convincing formula, strategy, methodology by which Wallenius Wilhelmsen measured this saving. That is what AI does in our company. It's very simple, and this is exactly how we use it, how we harness it, and these are the kind of results that we are seeing so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. Okay, I will at least book 3 hours from your calendar to discuss more about this modeling. So keep your calendar open.
Fantastic.
Tomorrow. Okay, some questions. Well, first of all, okay, this AI-based modeling is naturally quite hot topic, and I see the point why we are doing this. But could you perhaps highlight what are the biggest challenges with the modeling at the moment, and how have you overcome those?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, so the biggest challenge, as you could imagine, is with data quality. So this is something that, whilst there is a significant number of vessels out there that do have some sort of high frequency data coming in, what we have found time and time again is that often when that data is not being harnessed for anything particularly high impact, the quality of the data is not checked. You know, it all goes wrong, and of course we're all aware of the vagaries of sensors in the industry. But the key thing is when you start, it's only by starting to use this data that you can improve the quality of that data. And so we've always found that whilst at the beginning of our journeys with the companies that we work with, the data quality is pretty bad in a lot of cases. By the end of our sort of introductory period, then we've made leaps and bounds together in improving that. That's the primary thing, as you could probably imagine, Risto. After that, actually, the main challenge with implementing this kind of approach is more of a human element. So how to actually embed this kind of approach in an organization, but that's a different topic.
Good. Another question just came up, and this is about if we have any opinions regarding the real-time emissions monitoring through sensors, and I'm wondering that is that also part of your modeling to directly look at the emissions, or is it more concentrating on the power and fuel consumption?
It's a very good question. We focus more on the power and fuel consumption, and we equate the fuel. You know, what we try and do, and what this approach can allow you to do, is to genuinely minimize fuel consumption, for example, and then you can equate that with emissions. In terms of actually measuring that more directly in terms of emission savings, I know only a little bit about these directly measuring emission sensors. I'm not really the right person to speak about them. For us, it doesn't make, I don't think it changes how we would do anything, because we're just trying to minimize and optimize. But there may well be an advantage in having that in the future. I'd love anyone to talk to me about that if they think there is.
Yeah, good. And I think actually Gurinder is replying, writing some replies to this question. Good. Before moving to the next presentation, I would like to highlight that there will be another poll soon here. And while waiting for that, okay, here it comes. So we would like to ask the audience that what do you see as the biggest challenge in achieving CII compliance and voyage efficiency? And the options are lack of technology, regulatory hurdles, financial constraints, or lack of awareness and training. So please reply to these questions, and we will discuss this further during the longer Q&A session. Meanwhile, I encourage once more to put questions on the Q&A section of the event, so that we get more lively discussions after our final speaker, and can utilize the expertise of this excellent panel we have here today. But now it's time to move for our final presenter, Dimitra Konstantinou. didn't know, sorry about my pronunciations with the name. She's working as a senior energy efficiency engineer at Angeli Kussis Group, and yes, looking forward very much for her presentation. Would you like to first say a couple words about yourself, your biography, and then move to your presentation, Dimitra?
Thank you, Risto. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here today. Basically, as Risto said, I work as an energy efficiency engineer in Angeli Kussis Group. Basically, we do performance monitoring based on our internal performance system that we have developed, and that is SEEMP specific. And we have a very strong focus on our emissions and on optimizing our operations and making sure that we emit for our operational profile as low as possible, basically.
Good. So maybe you can then start to present. Yes, good. Very good.
Yeah, so basically this presentation will be about how a good vessel performance monitoring system can help manage the carbon intensity performance of one's fleet. We'll start talking about our performance system. Basically, it utilizes live data that come from multiple sources, including onboard sensors like torque meters and flow meters, weather and satellite data, and all sorts of data from draft sensors, known data, and everything is fused together and aggregated. And then basically this is taken into account into our system in order to support our decision making to trigger maintenance activities like hull cleanings, propeller polishing, main engine overhauling, and that can minimize any deterioration in the fleet's performance. So basically the core idea of our system is to quantify deviations in consumption against a baseline set during the sea trials and SOP and model tests for each vessel. So we have, let's say, vessel-specific models that we use, and then we benchmark the performance of the vessel against those models.
Dimitra, sorry for interrupting, but we have a little bit difficulties of hearing you, so I wonder if you can put the mic a little bit louder or speak more closely to your mic.
Yes, I will try. Thank you, Risto. Is it better now?
Yes, much better. Thanks.
Great. Okay. So basically, as I said, we're utilizing all this live data in order to check the performance of the vessels in real time. And then this is a core, let's say, thing that we do. And then on top of that, we use all the data to select the best performing anti-fouling paints. We also analyze the operational data of the vessels to make sure that we set with constant RPM and power. And basically, on top of that, we're also utilizing machine learning algorithms to select optimum trim. And we also monitor the electrical load to optimize the diesel generator utilization. So in order to do that, we have three key performance indicators. The first one is the power percent, which basically takes into account the performance of the hull and the propeller. The second one is fog percent, which takes into account the performance of the main engine. And the third one is excess consumption, which is a summary of the two that we mentioned. So we start with power percent. This is the typical graph of power percent that we present here. Basically, you see the performance of the hull and the propeller of the vessel over a period of 6 months. You see that when we start, the performance of the vessel is very good. It is around 100%. And as the months go by, we reach to a performance of around 6% on top of our baseline. This is actually a low figure that can be easily corrected through a propeller polishing. If we had a serious problem with our hull, like hull fouling, then this figure would be much higher and we would know that we need to clean the vessel. Then we have the spoke percent, which is the KPI that shows the performance of the main engine. We see here again a period of 6 months for the same vessel. The figures are around 97%, which means that the vessel is operating a bit better compared to the shock tests. And then we have the combination of those two, which is the excess consumption, which actually summarizes the performance of the vessel and what everyone cares about, what is the consumption of the vessel. And we see that we're around 1% at the beginning of the period, and we reach a figure of around 4% at the end of the period. And it's very interesting that if we combine the power percent and the spoke percent figures, so we're around 6% in power, minus 2% in spoke, and then we have a consumption of 4%. So it matches perfectly, because the two things that really affect the propulsion, let's say, consumption, is of course the hull and the propeller and the main engine. So those figures should always be in line, and this is an indication, first of all, that the modeling is done properly, and secondly, that the sensors are measuring correctly. So in order for the system to be able to do that, there are some advanced features. As was mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges with data is the actual data. So you need to make sure that you only use the proper data in your analysis. So the system really is able to detect the proper periods that can use for performance evaluation. And the way to do that is to identify stable periods and to only keep those periods in the analysis and assessment. So whatever is a transitional period, like you have weather changes at this point, the speed changes, the direction of the wind changes, then you need to basically kick those data out because they're not suitable for performance assessment. So basically the system is able to identify stable periods, and then if a new period is identified, the transitional period between those two is kicked out, then the new period is considered as a new condition, and so on. On top of that, in terms of data quality, it's very important to make sure that the data that you're using are correct and suitable for a performance assessment. And one issue that we have a lot is drifting torque meters. So basically, the torque meters might be measuring more or less than what is real. And let's say a quick way to identify that is to correlate the KPIs of power percent and spoke percent. So if you have a sudden drop in power and a sudden spike in spoke, then this is a very strong indication that probably your torque meter is not measuring correctly and that you should do a torque meter calibration. So the system is able to identify that and also kick that data out. Apart from that, we use our data and deploy machine learning algorithms to identify the optimum trim for the vessels. Actually, this is done on a series level, so a group of sister vessels. We get all the data from them, from their operation, and we see how the combinations of draft, speed, and trim affect their power percent KPI. And basically, we find the optimum combinations of trim, speed, and draft, and the vessel is able to have access to that tool and then decide on their departure what trim they should go with. And then I will move to carbon intensity indicators. Basically, I think there's no need to discuss too much about them because it's well known to everyone, but CII is obviously the CO2 emissions divided with the transport work of the vessel. And when we say transport work, we mean the summer maximum dead weight multiplied with miles that the vessel has traveled within that year. So obviously, if we take outside of the equation the operation of the vessel, I mean the operational profile, the voyages, etc., which are many times dictated by charters in, TC charters. And then what, as an operator, we can do is we can try to minimize our CO2 emissions for the specific operation that we're called to do. So basically, of course, CII performance is extremely linked to a good overall energy efficiency of the fleet. And basically, you need to make sure that your vessels consume and emit as low as possible for any given conditions. So the first step to manage the CII is, of course, to know what your vessel is doing. It is very common that DCS data are finalized or verified at the end of the year. So basically, you don't have a very clear picture of what the vessel is doing within the year. So you don't have the option to take remedial actions in time. Basically, what we are doing is that we are aggregating daily values from our live data and our known data in order to see what the vessel is doing every single month. And then here is a very nice example of how volatile the CII can be, especially at the beginning of the year, and how it is affected by the various operational profiles of the vessel. So basically, you can see that with green, we have the ballast legs, and then obviously this is beneficial to the CII because you have lower emissions for the same miles. With red, we have the laden legs, which are not extremely beneficial because you have higher consumption, but the most detrimental for the CII is the port stay, which is interesting to see in this graph. So you will see with the light blue one, what the port stay does to the CII. So basically you have a consumption which is not extremely high, but still you have some consumption without any miles, and this is very detrimental. So after knowing what your CII is, you can really know what steps you can take for the rest of the year in order to improve it. Apart from knowing what the vessel is doing, you should be able to know what your vessel is able to do, and what is the vessel's, let's say, technical specification and capabilities. So basically, if you have a performance system that somehow has modeled the fuel tables of all the vessels, taking into account the current performance, the weather, the specific draft, the specific speeds, not just the two curves that are given during sea trials, then basically you know what your vessel can do in any hypothetical profile that might take place for the rest of the year. So if at the same time you know what the vessel has done for the first 6 months, let's say, you can really project what the impact of the rest of your operations will be for the rest of the year, and make sure that you use the proper vessel for the proper route, and to make sure that you will finish the year with some, let's say, very good ratings. In that sense, we have developed a Voyage, CII Voyage estimation tool, which basically takes into account what the vessel has already done within the year. And then basically the user is able to choose an operational profile and project what the CII will be for the various scenarios that are examined. And this can really be used as a tool for our chartering department to choose the next voyage of the vessel, or to choose between two vessels and see which vessel should do which operational pattern, let's say. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Dimitra. Very interesting presentation, and we have a couple questions regarding that. We had here a question about the hull fouling estimation and the accuracy of the logs, apparently meaning the speed logs. Do you have any view on that?
Yeah, sure. I will start with the log meter. This is very interesting question. Basically, the log meter is the best source of speed that you can use for performance evaluation if it is measuring properly. So basically, we have many instances where the log speed is not extremely accurate. So what we do is we have come up with a tool that basically compares the log speed with the GPS speed over a very long period of time. And because the currents are usually over time, they're negative and positive. So over time, GPS and log speeds should be let's say, the same for a long period of time. So if you have an offset in that, you can really tell that your log meter is not measuring correctly, and then decide not to use it, or to correct it by that % of drifting and still use it in your assessment.
Okay, that's a good approach, and probably helps to overcome some errors in the data set. There was also one specific question. So then the other part of defining the half fouling is the use of the torque meter, and there was a comment that it should be calibrated quite often. Do you have also similar type of measure or correction method for the torque meter?
Yes. Basically, we're able to identify when the torque meter needs to be calibrated through comparing the power of the vessel with the spoke of the vessel. Because if, as I mentioned, if the spoke suddenly goes up and the power goes down, you know that there's a problem with your torque meter, and vice versa. If the power goes up very high and the spoke suddenly goes very low, then again, you know that you have a problem with your torque meter. If, however, you have a gradual increase in your power and your spoke remains stable, I mean the spoke %, then you know that most probably you have an issue with your hull or your propeller, and that you're foul and you need to come up with some actions to clean the vessel.
Okay. One more for you before we move to the general Q&A session, and that's from myself. We have had quite a lot of news about the increase of wind-assisted propulsion systems, and I would very much like to hear your opinion on those. Have you put any thought on that? How these new types of assisting sails could contribute, and do you have belief on those? And how do you see that the propulsion efficiency would be impacted if you would have such systems on board?
We have explored this field, let's say. There is for sure some benefit there, but then it's also a matter of cost efficiency. And then if it's viable from a financial point of view to go that way, of course there is an improvement and there is some reduction. Okay, if I may say so, it's not as high as usually advertised, but there is for sure some benefit there.
Yes, good. Okay. Still, before going to the Q&A part, I think we will get one more poll. If the administrator could launch it now. Hopefully we'll get it. Good. Okay, so please reply to our final poll. We will soon discuss the results. Thank you. Okay, let's start to grasp through the questions that we have got during the sessions, and the first question here is actually addressed for myself about the availability of the alternative fuels. So even the technology would be available, will there be enough alternative fuels? And this is extremely big question, and I think what is happening within our industry is that we are moving to a time where shipping starts to compete with their fuels with other industries that during the heavy fuel oil period has been quite different. So shipping has been quite isolated consumer of heavy fuel oil, and with these alternative fuels, there's definitely more competition about those. For example, ammonia, we are competing with the fertilizer industry, and hydrogen-based fuels. There we have competitors within airline industry. However, I think we have some encouraging news that so for example in Europe, I think we have already more than 100 renewable fuel projects on the planning table, and more news about those all the time. What will the ultimate supply be is of course another question, but I think we haven't reached yet at least the limits of the renewable electricity. There will be a lot of possibilities to increase the production of that. For fuels requiring biogenic carbon dioxide, the question is very different, so there is a limited source of that. So that's probably one of the reasons that the kind of a long-term forecasts are showing that ammonia would be past the methanol, for example, in this kind of race for what will be the biggest alternative fuel within shipping industry, because ammonia does not require this captured carbon for the production. But these are big questions. I don't have a correct answer. I don't know if this will be enough supply of those, but I see a lot of encouraging signs that the production is really kicking on, and time will tell us the real answer for that. Okay, next question I will put out for the whole panel here. I would like to ask your takeaways from the last summer's MEPC results. So at IMO's Marine Environmental Protection Committee, we had a quite huge change in the strategy, greenhouse gas strategy of IMO, and very ambitious targets set out. And my question for the panel is that how do you see these targets? Are these achievable, and what are the most important measures to achieve those? So I would like you to answer in the same order that you have had your presentations. So starting from Gurinder.
Thanks, Risto. I think it's of course a very relevant question. Quite honestly, I think we've seen this in the presentation as well. Broken down into three broad categories of technical and operational, and of course alternative fuels. From an industry perspective, where we're looking to reduce the emissions. Part of the thought process is that this is not going to be possibly everyone move along, right? We're expecting sort of that 80-20 rule to apply, that significant number of major operators moving in that direction, allowing the industry as a whole to move in the direction for the targets of 1.5 degrees of reduction, right? So, or of increase, I should say, of temperature globally. So the idea that the amount of investment needed and that everybody within the industry would be able to make it is, a significant hurdle. So in our minds, operational items going first, which is kind of the things we're talking about today, the technical things that are higher investment, but still capable of being done today and over the next 3 to 4 years. But post that, I think it's of course a crystal ball question, but in our minds, it's definitely going to take a shape of the bigger owners, operators, pulling sort of the rest of the industry along. And if that works out through the investments they're making, then everybody sort of reap the benefit of that. I think we've seen that in the LNG space, where gas as fuel started with some, forward-thinking folks. And today, when we see vessels like are ordered with ammonia ready and methanol and such, I mean, these are the movers that are going to make it happen. And if that initial phase is successful, then it'll work out. If it doesn't, I don't think the smaller vessels and the smaller fleets are actually going to make a significant dent in there. So yet to be seen, but that's our viewpoint on how it's going to move.
Thanks, Gurinder, for your good views. What about Mattia? Do you have?
I agree with Gurinder. I think that my feeling is that the target is far away from being achieved, because it's something that could be achieved only if the system is working together. So we need a lot of investments, and I mean, for example, infrastructures that today are not present, for example, in the Mediterranean area. And the average age of the fleet is 32 years. So I think that it's maybe impossible to achieve a level of energy efficiency only with technological measure and operational measure. You have to invest in alternative fuels, obviously. You have to support the ship owner in order to invest in new ships. And so new building would be a key success factor for this context, because LNG, biofuels, e-methanol, biomethanol, so new ships must be today designed in order to achieve these targets in the future. But I think that the key word is working together, so making system. It's the only way to succeed in this challenge, because 2030 is not so far away. So time is ticking. So I think that working together, making synergies between public and private investment could be the real most important factor to achieve.
Very good answer, Mattia. What about Angus? Do you have some insights?
Well, firstly, I agree with everything Gurinder and Mattia have said. I'll also add that the truth is, as we all probably know, so there are quite a lot of shipping companies out there who are really striving to make an improvement to the efficiency of their vessels. And they're the ones who are most likely to meet or come closest to these ambitious targets. And in the meantime, we'll also swiftly work out that they're becoming quite commercially successful as well in lots of instances. However, for all of those shipping companies, there's also quite a lot, as we all know, that are still doing almost nothing. And therefore, I think that whilst these targets are ambitious, at the same time, the shipping industry is, for understandable reasons, slow to change. And I think it's important that there are, the only way to move a very big rock is to give it a very big shove. And I think that ambitious targets are something that the world should aspire for, with all of the caveats that Mattia and Gurinder have said, which I fully agree with.
Good. Dimitra, do you still have something to add to the previous comments?
No, I think I'm covered. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take a look on the polls that we had during the earlier presentation. So the first poll that we had were about the voyage efficiency aspects for improving the CII compliance, and here we have the results. So that we have 30% 30% of the those who replied saying that fuel consumption reduction is the most important factor. Then 27% emission reduction technologies, 25% route optimization, and 24% speed management. Is there anybody from our expert panel today that would like to comment this result? Do you think that this is aligned with your expectations? Is there anybody who would like to comment this?
I just wanted to mention, Risto, it was interesting to see that, of course, number one is fuel reduction, and feels like B, C, and D all would apply for A. So it's,
Yeah.
I felt like A means all of the below,
Yeah, I can agree with that it, perhaps these are somehow part of the fuel consumption reduction here. Okay, the next poll that we had was about the biggest challenges achieving CII compliance, and there we had 27% were answering that the lack of technology is the biggest challenge. There was even one bigger. So financial constraints were answered by 32% of the people answering this, and then 27% the lack of technology, 25% lack of awareness and training, and 16% about the regulatory hurdles. Dimitra, you are working on a daily basis on the Voyage efficiency. How do you see this awareness and training? Do you have some active measures for the crew on board regarding these topics?
Yes, we have weekly training sessions about energy efficiency, and basically this is a holistic issue. It's not just one thing that should be done to improve the efficiency of the vessels. I think that what needs to be highlighted is sometimes it might be neglected for owners and seafarers, let's say old school seafarers that were used to the time charter situation. Now we care about the fuel, it doesn't matter who pays for that. The emissions are there, and basically it's crucial for the company to have a very good profile. So obviously we need to change our mentality a lot. Digitalization also plays a role, and people should really understand that this is a new era for shipping, that data are very important, what we report is very important, and that we should change our mindset a bit.
Yeah, a little bit continuation to that. You mentioned that in time charter this might be neglected while the charter is paying for the fuel. Now this CII regulation is actually kind of forcing owners and the charters to cooperate on this matter. For example, the BIMCO CII clause is kind of in a way it's like a shotgun wedding between the owners and the charterers, that they are both in charge of the CII. Do you have some feeling that has this really increased the cooperations between charterers and the ship owners / operators?
I would say yes, definitely yes. We see that charters are being more and more engaged into vessel performance, and we're in close communication with our charters to tackle those issues. So I see this as a positive, let's say, development. And yeah, I think that we're working more closely now, and I cannot imagine, what's going to come with EU ETS. I think that our collaboration, will be even closer.
Very good, thanks. The final poll we had was about trying to evaluate which one of the alternative energy sources used on board the vessels will be the most used in 2050, and we had a long list of options. The votes here are spread quite nicely around. I think we have the biggest share here is hydrogen, and then we have almost the same percentage with ammonia, LNG. Then we have e-methanol and nuclear. Nuclear with the 11% of the replies. Same with bio or e-LNG. Wind we have only 5%, same as with the liquid biofuels. Is there somebody from the panel that would like to comment these results? How do you see, for example, the low percentage of the liquid biofuels here? What could be the reason for this low level of trust on this being the biggest solution for shipping? Do you have, Dimitra, some views? You opened your mic, so.
Yeah. I'm not sure if biofuels are there now have as a low emission factor as they should to help shipping reach those targets. So they're good as a transitional fuel, maybe some quantities here and there to assist the battery rating, but I'm not sure if they would be the solution that shipping is looking for right now.
Okay. Then, of course, this nuclear part is very interesting. It's definitely a promising thing, but definitely we have still quite big lack of technology there and regulations and safety measures. I'm curious, Gurinder, if you have some insights about nuclear as an energy source for ships.
Yeah, I was gonna thanks, Risto. I was gonna make a quick comment on the earlier one as well for the liquid biofuel. As we look at these alternative energies, just the reality is that we're the shipping industry as a whole is competing for these fuels, and we are typically not paying top dollar for our fuel compared to the airlines and other industries. So. We see, at least we've seen a lot of that investment and movement in that direction by others who might end up paying more for these fuels that might come about, which might be easier to transition into, but are demanding a higher dollar possibly, and may not work in the economics for shipping at times. On the nuclear side, yeah, I would we. As a broader topic, we've seen, of course, a number of advancements in the discussions so far. There are some interesting project discussions and start of that funding happening specifically for size of plants that would be appropriate for shipping that are modular in nature. I think we've seen, in the previous times, we were seeing a lot of these modular LNG powered, power producing, 40-foot containerized sort of solutions, right? So, I think there's work to be done there, but the work that is currently being done between regulators, I know ABS on the classification side is actually quite involved in a number of these projects. It definitely shows a lot of promise purely from a technology standpoint. Regulations, whether they catch up to have something as a nuclear fuel available, I think those are more of stigmas rather than actual discussions happening. But unfortunately, as you know, the rulemaking bodies are political bodies, and discussions tend to not be purely technical in nature.
Very good. Would you, Mattia or Angus, still want to contribute to this discussion about alternative fuels, or shall we move forward?
But I think that I'm not a technician and I don't know very well the nuclear power energy, but I think that Fincantieri and Rina had launched a project named, I think, Nucleo, that it's something related to nuclear propulsion in the shipping maritime sector. And it's like something, a mini reactor in which you have the possibility to cooler the inside the reactor with seawater. But I think it's something that, generally speaking, could be using green energy, because nuclear is a green type, a type of green energy. Absolutely, it's a problem of maintenance. But if I think about a mini nuclear reactor in a shipping in a ship like us, like mine, with 1,500 people on board, we have to talk about it. So it's something that I don't know. You would go in a ship with a mini reactor, if you're a passenger. So the risk evaluation, the maintenance program, safety concern. So I think that like technology could be evaluated, but it's not a solution that could fit for all the ship owner, because passengers, I think, that couldn't be so happy to travel with a mini reactor on board.
Yeah, I think the same applies also probably to ammonia, that it's probably not suitable solution for the passenger vessel. So definitely, I think we could basically conclude here that, like the old saying says, that all solutions are needed in this field. Okay, there's one really interesting comment here on the Q&A part from Mr. Dragos Rauta from Intertanko, who is saying that the challenge with the CII is that the definition of the CII itself, which makes empty ship more efficient than fully laden ships, and there is no direct mathematical correlation between CO2 emissions and CII reference line. Same for EEOI, for which a ship with best lowest EEOI will have largest fuel consumption because it has more laden and longer voyages. And yeah, definitely one of my favorite topics. Those of you who have been following me on LinkedIn, if you're not doing that yet, please do that. I've been writing quite a lot about CII problems there, and agree very much with the comments of Dragos. The CII has some problems of a kind of derived indicator, and while we are not measuring the total emissions, it could even be counterproductive for considering the target of reducing the total emissions. Okay, we start to be quite close to the ending of the session, and very quick round still for the panel. In one sentence, what is the key takeaway you would like the audience to remember from these sessions? And again, let's do the same order as we had the presentation. So one sentence, Gurinder, what is the key takeaway you would like the audience to remember?
Just to say that stay curious and open-minded. We have a big challenge ahead of us, and we need to approach that with an open mind to meet the goals that we have. And all technologies and all processes and all sort of training and everything else that's going to go into it is very much needed for our industry.
Thank you. What about Mattia?
But I saw the Dimitra Angus presentation, and I think that the common ground between us is that If you can monitor, you can make decision with a more structured process. So it's important to make decision over data. So analyzing, monitoring constantly on daily basis. It's not sufficient to pursue to reach the target of efficiency that European Community requests, but it's very important for the company, because today we can say that environmental and energy procedures and processes are a bit more important than in the past, where the economic driver was the first and the only one to be considered before all the other processes. So I think the most important thing is monitor and take decision on the data that you can analyze on a daily basis, because it's important to be aware of it.
Okay, thanks, Mattia. That was a long sentence. So one short sentence, Angus.
A proactive focus on voyage optimization is the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to decarbonizing your fleet. And not only will you end up with more efficient vessels, but you will also save a lot of money in the process almost instantly.
Okay, thanks, Angus. So Dimitra, you're left with 10 words. We have so little time left. So
great. So I would say invest in data and make sure you have a good understanding of what your fleet is doing, and this is the basis for whatever improvement you can make.
Thank you very much. So we have reached the end of the session, and thank you everybody who participated to the panel and to the audience. It has been really interesting questions and interesting presentations. Thank you also for the organizer of the event, BS Group, and the sponsor, ABS Wavesight, and great to have you here, and let's keep in touch on other forums. Thank you very much, and have a good continuation of the day. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.